No DQ Galaxy, we are live with a recap of AEW Full Gear 2022. Shout out to everybody watching this live. The early birds, Bill R., Joey Perez, Walter Cruz, of course, Gomer Kyle, Michael Wayne, Dustin, Harito. Thank you all for tuning in right off the bat. And if you're watching this and you're enjoying it, please share a link on social media. Tell a friend. Any word of mouth is very much appreciated. Now, let's get into the recap. If you did watch the show and you have your own opinions, leave them in the chat room. I will be putting up some of the comments on the screen. We did have the 0 hour pre-show, 1 hour pre-show, 3 matches. First match was the Best Friends going up against the Factory in a 10-man tag team match. I'll talk about these matches very quickly here for the kickoff. No fifth person out there for the Best Friends at first. And because of the 5-on-4 advantage, the Factory had the upper hand. But then Danhausen did arrive. Danhausen a little bit more serious than usual. He had some teeth in a jar because of what happened to him recently, I believe on Rampage. He put the teeth into Nick Camarado's mouth and then pinned him to win the match. And then afterwards, Danhausen grabbed a spike and took down QT Marshall with the spike. Then they did the big Best Friends hug. Fun little opening match here to kick off the show. Standard stuff, though, just your average TV match, but we got the big Danhausen moment coming out there, being a little bit more serious. Then we had what I thought was going to be on the pay-per-view card. It was a semifinal match in the world title eliminator match. Ricky Starks versus Brian Cage. Decent match here, back and forth. Starks did end up picking the victory up with the Rochambeau. And then after the match, it was confirmed that this Wednesday on Dynamite, Ricky Starks will face Ethan Page in the final match, with the winner going on to challenge the AEW World Champion at Winter is Coming. And I think now that we know who the world champion is, and we'll get to that later, it's pretty obvious who is going to win this eliminator tournament. And maybe that's why they decided to save it, which if that is the case, then I think it was smart, because if they did the final match on the pay-per-view, then you would make assumptions about what was going to happen in the main event. So I actually think it was better to hold off on this match. Anyways, we had our third and final match of the 0 hour, Eddie Kingston versus Akiyama. And it was a hard-hitting match, as you would expect from these guys. And Eddie Kingston was very emotional about this. For him, this was a dream match. Went back and forth here. Kingston had to hit more than one of his spinning back fists to pick up the victory. And then after the match, he got on the mic. He embraced Akiyama and thanked the fans for coming, started paying tribute to Japanese wrestlers that have passed away. And he then plugged the pay-per-view, said, order the goddamn pay-per-view. And by the way, Kingston was on a bit of a time crunch. They were trying to wrap him up, so he talked quickly. And he said, my man Jon Moxley is going to beat the piss out of MJF. And this was a little preview of what was to come. Crowd booed this. They were very much into Eddie Kingston, but they booed when Kingston said that Jon Moxley would be beating MJF. Nice promo, though, from Eddie Kingston to lead us into the pay-per-view. We had our opening match, steel cage match, big way to kick off the show indeed. Luchasaurus versus Jungle Boy Jack Perry. You had Christian Cage out there. Luchasaurus was dominating early on. He sent Perry into the cage. I guess we'll call him Luke Perry now. Or Jack Perry, I should say. My apologies, Jack Perry. That maybe I'm just going to call him Jungle Boy so I don't screw that up again. He threw Jungle Boy into the cage, and very early on, Jungle Boy was busted open. And then Christian grabbed the key while the referee was distracted on the outside, and Christian opened the cage door. Both Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy ended up brawling on the outside of the ring. Luchasaurus pulled a table from under the ring and brought it into the ring. Christian did get kicked out as all this was going down, and Jungle Boy started to make a comeback, hit the Destroyer. Luchasaurus kicked out at 1. Jungle Boy hit a kill switch. Luchasaurus kicked out at 2. But then Luchasaurus chokeslammed Jungle Boy through a table. Jungle Boy kicked out of that. And then Luchasaurus continued to dominate, told Jungle Boy to stay down. Jungle Boy slapped Luchasaurus, and then the other table that was in the ring, Jungle Boy set up the table, and he laid out Luchasaurus on the table. He then climbed up the cage, and then Jungle Boy off the top rope hit the big splash off the top, or not a splash, an elbow drop off the top of the cage, putting Luchasaurus through the table. And then he applied the snare trap, and Luchasaurus immediately tapped out to the snare trap, which was a bit of a surprise for me. I mean, I did predict Jungle Boy to win the match, but I was not expecting Luchasaurus to tap out. It's like, imagine Kane tapping out to Rey Mysterio. It's just kind of hard to believe. But there you go. I mean, I expected it to happen, and I figured the Jungle Boy would get his revenge in this match. It was a very good match. Love the elbow drop off the top through the table. And Jungle Boy fought off everything that Luchasaurus had. But the question is, where does Luchasaurus go from here? Losing this match to Jungle Boy. But Jungle Boy can perhaps go for a championship at some point. Next up, we had the Death Triangle versus the Elite, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, officially back on AEW television. They made their grand entrance to Carry On Wayward Son, which I believe they tried to trademark, but were unable to do so. They still got the music licensed, and they made the big entrance. They had their entire crew with them. Don Callis, Brandon Cutler, Nakazawa. Crowd was chanting, "Welcome back." And then very interesting FCM Punk chants started out. And they really grew. I mean, they were very loud in the arena. Crowd also chanted Colt Cabana. Could you even imagine, like 3 months ago, that a crowd would erupt in a FCM Punk chant? Like, it's crazy. 14 months, things can really change. I think back to Chicago when CM Punk returned, how beloved he was. And here at Full Gear, CM Punk, FCM Punk chants from the crowd. It'll be interesting to see how fans react on Wednesday, though, when AEW returns to Chicago. So anyways, very fast-paced, entertaining match, as you would expect from these guys. Incredible crowd heat for it. This is what the fans want. The AEW fan base, they want the athleticism. They want the high-flying moves. They want the stuff that the Young Bucks do with the Lucha Brothers and Pac and Omega doing their thing. Like, all 6 guys have tremendous chemistry, and Tony Khan is really going to get as much out of this as possible. More on that in just a few moments. So it was very back and forth here. Lots of dives, and the crowd was chanting "Fight Forever." Lots of kickouts and near falls. And the main storyline here in the later part of this match was that Pac had the hammer. Over the past several weeks, Pac has tried to get Rey Fenix to cheat in the match, but Fenix has a conscience and he doesn't want to cheat. So Fenix refused to use the hammer. He tossed it away. And then later, Pac tried to use it, but he was stopped by Nick Jackson. Then more chaos. Omega had the upper hand on Fenix, but then Pac handed the hammer to Fenix, and Omega was about to hit the one-winged angel to end the match, and that's when Fenix finally used the hammer. Referee did not see it, and Fenix was able to pin Omega at that point and pick up the 1-2-3 victory. Still your trios champions. The Death Triangle, which I was not predicting. I predicted new champs here, but the champs retain. And then afterwards, Pac was very satisfied with Fenix's actions using the hammer. Tony Khan then announced, I guess they announced it on the pay-per-view too, that this Wednesday it will be the second match with these two teams in a best-of-7 series. So yes, like I said, they are going to milk this as much as possible. And I mean, these guys have great chemistry, like I said, and it very well may be a fight forever scenario. They're going to do 7 matches, and I presume it'll go down to the 7th match. I think the way they have it timed is that the 7th match will be in Los Angeles. So yeah, think we're getting 7 matches, and this was the first one tonight, and it will continue over the next several weeks on television until we finally get to what I presume will be the 7th match in Los Angeles. And of course, some of us might remember the Booker T, Chris Benoit Best of 7 series. That's the one that really made it famous, and I think they did another one in 2005, and I believe Sheamus and Cesaro had one, and that led to them becoming a tag team. It'll be entertaining. We'll see what they do if they can change it up a little bit and do some different types of matches. No doubt they'll all be fun to watch, and yeah, there you go. Best of 7 series coming up. And I was feeling really bad for whoever had to follow this because the first 2 matches were great, right? You had the cage match. That was a lot of fun. The trios match was a wild ride. And then you had Jade Cargill versus Nyla Rose, which I guess sucks to be them, but that was probably the best choice to follow up the first 2 matches. So anyways, Nyla Rose made her entrance with a lowrider, Eddie Guerrero style. Of course, Vicky Guerrero was there with her. Pretty basic match here, not much to it, as you would expect, having to follow the first 2 matches. Nyla did get in some offense, even hit Jade's finisher, the Jaded, on her, but Jade was able to avoid a senton, hit her with a pump kick, and then finished her off with the Jaded. Still your TBS champion, Jade Cargill. Next up, we had a fatal 4-way match for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Chris Jericho versus Sammy Guevara versus Claudio versus Bryan Danielson. And they were brawling all over the place in the early moments, and Bryan and Claudio were working together for a while, but then they decided, in the spirit of competition, it really should be every man for himself. So after shaking hands, they started fighting each other. Sammy Guevara helped out Jericho at one point. Excuse me. Sammy Guevara hit a double cutter to both to Bryan and Claudio. Jericho gave Guevara a hug, was very thankful for that. And then Jericho and Guevara were working together for a while. Bryan came in, managed to fight off both of them. But then Jericho hit a lion salt to both Bryan and Guevara, taking down Guevara to get in a move on Bryan. Jericho hit a code breaker to Claudio, but then Guevara broke up the pin, and that's when things started to fall apart for Jericho and Guevara. They started fighting, and then Bryan and Claudio took advantage of the situation. They put the sharpshooter and the bell lock on Jericho at the same time, but Guevara broke that up. And then Jericho and Guevara temporarily were on the same team again, but then Guevara double-crossed Jericho, hit the go to hell, and then hit a shooting star press, but Jericho kicked out. Match continued, and then Guevara hit a shooting star press to Claudio on the outside, got Claudio back in the ring. However, Claudio countered him and put on the big swing. Jericho then came in and hit Claudio with not one, but two Judas effects, and I don't think he got him pretty good on the first one. So he hit a second one and scored the 1-2-3 victory. So still your Ring of Honor World Champion, Chris Jericho. Match was very good. Not at the level of the first two matches, in my opinion. And Jericho winning, I fully expected. But still enjoyable match with these guys, as you would expect. Then we had Britt Baker versus Saraya. Saraya's big comeback match, her first match in 5 years. Saraya's brother was there. Britt Baker was out there alone. Crowd chanted, "Welcome back" at Saraya. But I have to say, I thought the match was decent, but nothing special, average. And the crowd was not as much into it as you might think. I feel like it was lacking a bit in crowd heat, and maybe that's because the show started so strong that people were already starting to feel burned out. And also, who are you supposed to be cheering for? Because as we saw on Wednesday, Britt Baker basically cut a babyface promo when Saraya is supposed to be the face, I would think. But anyways, Britt Baker spent a lot of time working over the neck of Saraya. So, playing up on the injury, kind of like when Shawn Michaels came back and they had the match at SummerSlam, Shawn and Triple H was working over Shawn's back. This was not as good as that, but, they were trying to play up on the real injury. And Saraya kept fighting back. She escaped a lockjaw attempt, and Britt hit multiple moves: air raid crash, curb stomp, a second stomp. Saraya kept kicking out, and then Saraya picked up the win after hitting not one but two of her Rampage DDTs, and I'm guessing it's going to need a new name unless they just spell it Rampage like the show Rampage. I don't know, but they didn't have a name for it, and Saraya does pick up the win. And yeah, maybe because it was her first match back, they played it a little safe. Match was all right, but not a classic or anything, in my opinion. And next up, we had Wardlow versus Samoa Joe versus Powerhouse Hobbs for the TNT Championship. And Wardlow went right after Joe, trying to get some payback after Joe double-crossed him a few weeks ago. And Hobbs took advantage. He got the upper hand on Wardlow, hit a delayed vertical suplex, but then Wardlow started to fight back, and he came off the top with a Jeff Hardy-like whisper in the wind onto both guys, and each one got a fair amount of offense during the match. They fought on the outside for a bit, and Wardlow was on the verge of picking up the win. He hit multiple power bombs to Hobbs, but then Samoa Joe hit Wardlow with the TNT title and then applied his submission finisher to Hobbs. Hobbs was already knocked out from all the power bombs. He got hit with 4 or 5 of them. So the referee said, that's it. Hobbs is out, and Samoa Joe is your new TNT champion. I guess this was a good way to get the title off of Wardlow, do the triple threat match, and Joe basically stole the title. He stole the win from Wardlow. Match was good. I enjoyed it. I'm a little surprised, though. I thought Wardlow would retain. Joe's now a double champion. He's got the Ring of Honor TV title, or one of those titles, and he's also the TNT champion now. Maybe Wardlow will actually go for the world title now. We'll perhaps talk about that later on. Then we had Double J, Jeff Jarrett, and Jay Lethal going up against Sting and Darby Allin. What is this, TNA? Crowd definitely thought so, because they were even chanting TNA during this match. So Jeff Jarrett had several people dressed up like Sting. Feels like an angle from 1998 or something. And there's a body bag on the stage. Darby Allin was not in the body bag. He ran out from the entranceway, and he had his skateboard. He was attacking Jay Lethal and the fake Stings. And then back in the ring, the real Sting showed up behind Jeff Jarrett, and they started brawling. Like I said, the crowd was chanting TNA. They were fighting all over the place, and Darby set up a ladder on the stage and was going to jump off the ladder. This was a no DQ match, by the way, so they could fight anywhere they wanted. Darby jumped off the ladder with a coffin drop. However, Satnam Singh showed up and caught Darby, took Darby to the stage, and just basically tossed him onto the stage. It looked brutal. And then Satnam Singh went over into the other side of the arena, where Sting and Jarrett were fighting in the stands. And Satnam Singh helped out Jarrett, or no, it was Jay Lethal, one of them. But the key point here was that Sting jumped off the platform onto Satnam Singh, and it was Jay Lethal. It was Singh and Lethal that Sting jumped on. So Sting doing his typical dive on the pay-per-views. And then back in the ring, everybody started following normal tag rules, which really made no sense to me. Like, it's a no DQ match. Why are they doing normal tags now? And Jeff Jarrett had his guitar out there, so didn't really make sense to me. And then things, of course, started to break down again. Singh got in the ring and choke slammed Sting. Jarrett went for a cover, but Sting kicked out. And then Darby went for the coffin drop. However, Jarrett nailed him with the guitar as Darby was coming down. Darby, though, basically no-sold it, stood up, got his second wind, and then Sting came back in, and Satnam Singh came in, and Darby came off the top with a coffin drop as Sting hit the Scorpion Death Drop to Singh. And Sting then hit a death drop to Jay Lethal, but they botched it. timing wasn't really right on it. However, Darby then hit the coffin drop on Jay Lethal and picked up the victory. Match was entertaining. It was what it was. And, it was fun. The Sting matches are fun. He does his dives. And the stuff they did with Satnam Singh was well done. So, yeah, I had no real issues with it other than the whole idea that they start making tags in an ODQ match. But other than that, it was fun. Next up, we had Toni Storm versus Jamie Hayter for the interim women's championship. And the crowd was very much behind Jamie Hayter. She's had a lot of momentum as of late. So the crowd was cheering for her. It was back and forth between these two. Jamie Hayter was having some issues with the referee, and Toni Storm would take advantage. And Storm was building up momentum, maybe on the verge of winning, and that's when we started getting the shenanigans. We had Rebel running down to the ring, and Storm got busted open from a strike by Hayter, and Hayter hit Storm with the championship while the referee was distracted. Hayter then hit a lariat. Storm kicked out, though, and Rebel ended up being ejected from the ringside area. Storm hit her own lariat, but Hayter kicked out of that, and then Storm was thrown to the outside of the ring. And that's when Britt Baker arrived. So they kicked out Rebel, but Britt Baker came out anyways. Britt Baker hit the curb stomp to Storm on the championship on the outside of the ring. And Storm was thrown back into the ring. Storm still kicked out. And then Britt Baker exposed the turnbuckle pad. Somehow was not ejected like Rebel. And Storm ended up being sent into the exposed turnbuckle. And then Jamie Hayter pinned Storm with a lariat to become the new interim women's champion. So they do a interim title change, but Thunder Rosa is still the recognized women's champion. I'm happy they went with Jamie Hayter, although I would have preferred a clean finish here if they were going to do it. Just felt a little bit too much with all the interference, and especially what happened in the main event too. I feel like some of the matches on this show had way too much outside interference. And if you do it for one match on the pay-per-view and it makes sense in the storyline, that's fine. But if you start doing it like in 3 or 4 matches on the show, it becomes a bit much. So yeah, it was a good match, but you had a lot of the shenanigans, and maybe Jamie Hayter becomes the actual champion and they strip Thunder Rosa. I mean, who knows what's happening at this point? But yeah, they went with Hayter, and you know what? I'm not against that idea considering the momentum that she's had, but I would have had her win clean, quite frankly, if it was my call. Just go with her. You know, if you're going to go with her, go all the way. We had the Acclaimed versus Swerve in Our Glory. And by the way, Walter sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Walter. Says, sleeper of the night for me, good women's match. Yeah, and it had good heat at the end. I mean, that goes to show how much the fans were into Jamie Hayter. And they did pop big for the win. I mean, they really wanted to see the title change. And they got it. There you go. Swerve in Our Glory versus the Acclaimed for the AEW Tag Team titles. Billy Gunn was not there at ringside because he did not want to let his emotions get the best of him. He's still mad about his fingers being smashed by Swerve. And the announcers were talking about how Bowens was not 100%. And Swerve in Our Glory dominated a good part of the match early on, and Swerve grabbed a piece of the guardrail and set it up against the ring. as Keith Lee was working over Bowens. Caster eventually got the hot tag, and then Keith Lee saved Swerve from landing on that guardrail that was set up on the outside. But then Caster hit a crossbody to Keith Lee off the apron, both of them crashing into the guardrail. So yes, Keith Lee basically took that guardrail bump, which was from something that Swerve brought into the match in the first place. And then Swerve almost beat Bowens here, hit him with several kicks to the head. Bowens remained defiant, and then Swerve hit another kick, but Bowens managed to kick out of that. Bowens avoided the Swerve stomp, tagged in Caster. Caster hit the mic drop to Swerve, but then Lee broke up the pin. Lee was back in it. Lee and Swerve hit the power bomb and stomp combo. Caster kicked out of that, and then Bowens tagged back in. Caster was thrown over the timekeeper's table by Swerve, and then Swerve grabbed some pliers, and he was gonna, I guess, try to break the fingers of Caster, and then that's when Billy Gunn finally showed up. He had enough. Referees were dealing with Billy Gunn. Swerve got in the ring and handed the pliers to Lee, but Lee threw them down. So this was very much similar to the whole Pac and Rey Fenix thing, except Lee actually did not go to the dark side. He threw the pliers down. Swerve slapped Lee, and then Lee helped up Bowens and walked out on Swerve. He took his leave. Swerve was by himself, and it was easy pickings for the Acclaimed. They finished off Swerve and scored the pin to retain their championships. Match was good, but I don't think that it was at the level of their previous matches, the All Out match as well as the Grand Slam match. But still, very good match here. And again, it felt like because this show was running so long, the crowd was starting to get burned out. But yeah, I mean, this was an obvious direction they were going with Keith Lee breaking away from Swerve, and they might end up having a match at some point. Then we had our main event of the evening, Jon Moxley versus MJF for the AEW World Championship. A crowd, of course, in Newark, New Jersey, not too far from Long Island. They were chanting for MJF. They were chanting new champ. Moxley got a mixed reaction and even some FU Moxley chants. Moxley was flipping off the crowd, and Moxley smacked MJF, but MJF fought back, and MJF was taunting Moxley, doing the Ric Flair strut, and Moxley was sent to the outside. MJF teased like he was going to do a dive to the outside, but he just kept running the ropes. And the match went back and forth here. Moxley took advantage of MJF because MJF was trying to set up a table. He got the timekeeper's table, set it up by the ring, and Moxley gained the upper hand. And then they were both fighting on the apron. MJF gave Moxley a tombstone pile driver on the apron, but I guess he landed bad on his knee. He was selling it for a while, and then Moxley got MJF on the apron and gave him a pile driver through that table. Big spot here. MJF was barely able to beat the 10 count, and Moxley immediately hit a paradigm shift, but MJF was able to kick out. Moxley continued to target the leg, put on the figure 4 leg lock. MJF eventually reversed it. Moxley hit a avalanche paradigm shift, which MJF was able to grab the rope to avoid being pinned. And then Moxley started taunting MJF, telling him to hit him, use the F word. MJF started to fight back. They traded blows, and then the referee got knocked down, of course. That's when MJF went for the Dynamite Diamond ring and was going to use it. However, William Regal came down to ringside and told MJF to put it down. MJF got rid of the diamond ring and flipped off Regal. Moxley applied a chokehold, but MJF broke out of it. And then a second referee came into the ring, but he got knocked down. So 2 referees were down. Moxley applied the Bulldog choke, and MJF tapped out, but there was no referee. And Regal, big swerve here, everybody. Regal took the brass knucks and slid him over to MJF. Pretty much exactly what everybody thought was going to happen here. When MJF said, I'm not going to use the Dynamite Diamond ring, we all thought, well, he'll use the brass knucks. That's how he's going to win. And sure enough, MJF with the brass knucks gets the 1-2-3 victory, and we have a brand new AEW World Champion, MJF, which I'm happy for. He should be the champ. But again, like the interim women's championship match, I think they should have done a clean finish. I know people want MJF as a heel. They don't want him to be a good guy or anything like that. But I think if MJF beat Moxley clean, that would just put him over the top. And he could brag about it like a heel. He could say, I beat him in the middle, and whether you people like it or not, like he could just be totally arrogant about it. But I think I would have preferred MJF winning clean personally. However, I am happy that he is the world champion. And the whole Regal thing with Moxley, I think that pretty much ran its course. Blackpool Combat Club appears to be over and done with. Dylan Hensley sent in a very generous $20 super chat. Much appreciated, Dylan. Says, to the people who complain about AEW signing ex-WWE guys, MJF is the first guy to win the world title who did not make it big in another promotion, considering Jericho, Moxley, and Punk from WWE and Kenny and Page from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And that is a very good point. And all the more reason why I would have liked to have seen MJF win the title clean instead of going with the very obvious William Regal with the brass knucks. Like they could have even done like a rematch where in the rematch Regal helped MJF win or something like that. But all in all, fun main event here. And Joey Perez says Roman is a heel. People are cheering for him. MJF will be fine. You're right. He'll be fine. But I think I would have preferred the clean finish personally. Walter Cruz with a $5 super chat says, I knew the ending. I called it, but I don't get it. MJF's promo skills are elite. Doesn't need a manager at all. So I don't know why pair Regal with him. We will see. I mean, that's a good point too. MJF 100% does not need a mouthpiece, but at the same time, Regal with the Blackpool Combat Club, like it had its run, but it was time to move on from it. And Regal as a heel can be fun. So we'll see what they do. I'm definitely not going to knock it. I think it has a lot of potential to be good. And Roman Reigns can talk. You still have Paul Heyman out there. So I definitely think it can work. And Building Nexus with a $5 super chat. So this is an interesting one too. He says, does AEW have a reverse Roman Reigns problem with MJF's crowd reactions? Because I don't think those cheers are going away. I think he's going to be cheered no matter what they do. But it could be like Roman Reigns, where Roman's a heel, but the bloodline. People love the bloodline. They cheer the bloodline anyway. So it's just going to be what it is. And they're going to fight it for as long as they can. So we'll see what happens. I think they could have pulled off a babyface MJF without changing him. I mean, Steve Austin became the biggest babyface in wrestling, and he was still a badass. He still was stone cold, and people still loved him. He didn't have to change the character to be beloved. And with MJF, he could still be an a-hole. He could still go out there and do his thing, but he can win matches cleanly without interference and kind of be like a babyface character. But yeah, definitely some signs that MJF was going to win as a heel. I mean, Jungle Boy winning, probably Jungle Boy will be a challenger. And like I said earlier, saving the final match of the Eliminator tournament, I think makes sense now because it's pretty obvious to me that Ricky Starks is winning this now. Like if Ricky Starks had defeated Ethan Page on the pay-per-view, then I'd be like, well, I think that means a heel's winning the match, and that means MJF is winning as a heel. But if Ethan Page won, then I think, well, MJF's going to win as a babyface. But they just decided to not do the match on the pay-per-view, and I think that was the right call to save it for Dynamite so it wouldn't so much give away the ending, although I still think people saw that ending coming from a mile away. And I agree with Gomer Kyle. Regal definitely better as a heel here. But yeah, I do think like they overdid it with the outside interference, people getting hit with the title, the weapons being used. It was a bit much. And I think with the pay-per-views, I would prefer more clean finishes unless there's a really good reason to do outside interference. And on top of that, I'm not the biggest fan of doing like these finishes with shenanigans with titles that have been flip-flopping around, the world title with CM Punk's whole issue, the interim title, the title's already been through a bunch of different controversies and, the Thunder Rosa deal with the interim title. Like I'm not a big fan of flip-flopping the titles a lot. And then on top of that, doing all the referee bumps and everything. So I personally would have done it a little bit different, but all in all, still another very strong pay-per-view from AEW. I give it a B+. Not the best AEW pay-per-view in my opinion, but still very much worth the money, and I'd recommend watching it. It was long, but that's just the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future. So yeah, I mean, very entertaining show. Yeah, you could have cut out a few matches, made it a little bit shorter. I think that would have been better, but still 100% worth the money in my opinion. And Dylan Hensley sent in $2. Thank you for that. Dylan says, Full Gear proved why AEW is the best promotion. Well, I mean, they definitely give you your money's worth. I will say that. For $50, you are most certainly getting a lot of bang for your buck. And that was Full Gear, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. And Walter Cruz sent in $2. Thank you, Walter. Says, please like, share, feel merchy, # stick to my shtick. I appreciate that, Walter. You guys can head over to nodq.com/merch. Use the code EARLYBIRD for 20% off No DQ merchandise. Have a great week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. And we'll be back Sunday night for our Survivor Series predictions. Stay tuned for that. And remember to say yes to NoDQ.com. And I will see you all next time.